The Azerbaijani president Ilham Aliyev is accusing Armenia of posing a, quote, fascist threat that needs to be destroyed. Aliyev threatened further military action if Armenia does not comply with Azerbaijan's territorial demands, more specifically, to open the so-called Zangezur corridor, which would create a land link between Azerbaijan and Turkey through Armenian land. Now, Armenia's leader called the comments a possible attempt to justify a fresh conflict. And joining me now to break this down is Rafael Aliyev, a political risk analyst in Yerevan, Armenia. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. An escalation of words and rhetoric, how serious would you say that this is?
It's very hard to tell at this point for a couple of reasons. It is probably rhetoric. For one way of looking at the situation is that the Azerbaijani president is setting the tone for an incoming Trump presidency, hoping that they will be able to maximize their leverage with a new administration in Washington and then try to push a maximalist agenda on Armenia as part of their apparent peace negotiation process. However, there are other aspects at play here, namely obvious rearmament on the Azerbaijani side, an increase of flights from known military suppliers to Azerbaijan, as well as claims by the Azeri MOD, which were incidentally disproven by EU observers, that Armenian forces were involved in a ceasefire violation. And there are precedents in the last few years where Azerbaijan ups the rhetoric, usually the accusation of Armenia being fascistic for some reason, followed by accusations of ceasefire violations. Then we see these increase in arms supplies before there's some kind of a large-scale disturbance of the peace. So at this point, it's still unclear. However, most analysts think that at the moment it's mostly rhetoric.
Right. I want to ask you about something you mentioned, the potential timing of this with President Trump coming in. Is there a reason for it to be brought up now, specifically?
Yeah, so it's about setting the tone of the relationship. Aliyev is hoping for a fresh start with a new administration. The Biden administration was quite harsh, relatively speaking, on Azerbaijan. However, even the Biden administration never took very concrete steps to sanction Azerbaijan for committing an ethnic cleansing of the entire population of Nagorno-Karabakh just over a year ago. However, there's hope that because President Trump personally has ties with a lot of Turkish and Azerbaijani business people, claims to have good relations with Erdogan, the president of Turkey, which is the main ally and sponsor of Azerbaijan, and also the tight relationship, incidentally, which would be of interest to this show, the tight relationship that the Trump administration has with Israel and the support that Trump has promised Israel in any conflict with Iran is something that Azerbaijan, which neighbors Iran, as does Armenia, incidentally, is hoping to capitalize on, or at least the distraction of any conflict with Iran would benefit Azerbaijan in attempting to exert some maximalist demands on Armenia, either diplomatically or militarily, if they attempt that.
All right, Rafael, thank you very much for joining us this evening. And I want to bring this to the studio now. Dan, we were talking earlier, you've been to Armenia many times, and you mentioned that there's something interesting, not just about what was said, but how Aliyev said it.
Yeah, Aliyev has designs on sovereign Armenian territory, which is different from Nagorno-Karabakh, which was a self-governing enclave populated by Armenians, but within the territory, the recognized territory of Azerbaijan. Now, there is a fear in Armenia, and that fear is backed by Western intelligence, that they intend to invade Armenia to seize this corridor, which would create a land bridge to Turkey, and basically extend Turkey's influence via a land bridge and a trade route all the way to Central Asia. Aliyev has been talking suddenly about this fiction of Armenian fascism and how it must be destroyed, and if the Armenian leadership doesn't destroy it, then he, Aliyev, would destroy it for them. Now, this mirrors almost one-to-one the rhetoric of Vladimir Putin before he invaded Ukraine. And basically, is more than just analogous. It is like a red flag and all alarms blazing from the perspective of Armenia, which puts Israel in a very interesting situation. Israel has, a somewhat shameful alliance with Azerbaijan. Shameful because this is one of the world's most despotic regimes, but it is clearly a case of realpolitik in the extreme. Azerbaijan gives Israel a forward base vis-a-vis Iran. It buys Israeli weapons that have been used against the Armenians, and it sells Israel oil. But Israel may not want to aid and abet an invasion of Armenia and a seizure of the corridor, because that would work very much to further embolden Turkey, which Israel has an issue with right now. So, complicated.
Very complicated. Dan Perry, thank you very much for your input, your analysis, for being with us in the show this evening.